All right, boys, I either made a really good trade or a really dumb trade. I just traded my Yamaha 225, it's a 2000 model, for this bag girl right here. So this thing is a 2005 CRF450x. The X is supposed to be the cross-country model. So it's basically made for any terrain, you know, road, desert, trails, rocks, gravel, a little bit of everything. So it's got the headlight for road use. It's got the electric start. It's got the Kickstarter. It's basically designed for anything you could possibly put it through, which is exactly what I'm looking for. I've been looking for one of these bikes for so long, so whenever I got the opportunity to get one, I definitely couldn't pass it up. I have no idea what's wrong with this thing. I have zero information on it, besides that it sit outside in the sun. You can see these plastics are pretty faded. It sit outside for like 3 or 4 years before that guy I got it from bought it. And then it sat in his shop for about 5 or 6 years on top of that. So this thing has not ran in probably 10 years or so. But I guarantee you I'm gonna get it running. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start with spark and compression. That's what I always start with. But just by kicking it over by hand, I can tell the compression's pretty low. My guess is it's something to do with the valves leaking off compression. Maybe they're just a little tight or something. So I guess the first thing I'm gonna do is see if this electric start works. I have no idea if it works or not. So this battery's dead, obviously. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my gym box. So I don't think there's a key or anything on here. You should be able to just hit the button. Okay, so you gotta have the clutch pulled in. So the electric start works fine. That's awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and check the compression on this thing. To do that, I'm gonna have to pull off this gas tank, which is just a bolt up here. And there's usually a strap here, but it's missing. Now you can actually see the plug down in there. This is the spark plug boot. And then the spark plug way down there. So I'm gonna pull that guy out. Wow, the plug was already loose. That's crazy. It's got one of them fancy plugs in there. All right, now we can check for spark. Awesome, so it's got a good spark. That's a great sign. Now I can get the compression tester in here. You can see I got the little adapter that matches the same size. Now we can turn it over and see how much compression it's got. So obviously 30 pounds is pretty low. And considering that it does have compression, it's just low, that's probably gonna be the rings. I bet this is enough to run because it does have a decompression system, but there is a chance that these valves are just a little bit tight and that's why it's just a little bit low. So I'm gonna pull this valve cover off and check the valve clearances, and if they're all within spec, it's probably gonna be the piston rings. But let's hope that the valves are just a little bit tight. I'm pretty sure these do have bucket shims, so it's gonna be a little annoying. That is a funky looking bolt. Wow. That just looks like something Honda would do. Oh, of course, this one's different, yeah. A little space here. They look cool. I give them that. Wow. I actually really like the black coating on there. That looks clean. Huh. Okay, so there looks like there is a lot going on here. So this is the single cam system for 4 valves. 2 exhaust, 2 intake, I'm guessing. Yeah, I see the 2 shims in there. Wow, all this is like bone dry. There's no oil up here at all. That's not good. So let me get this thing on top dead center. I'm gonna have to pull the little cover off. I think it might be on the other side. I might have to just do it with the Kickstarter, I'm not sure. But I'm pretty sure this is a little sight cover that shows the position of the crank, because the stator is on this side. You can see the wire going in. So the flywheel is on this side. I think I might have to turn it from the other side. I'm not sure actually. I don't know, we'll get this figured out though. I might take this off and it might be behind there. That's probably where the oil filter is, I'm not sure, but. So normally I would have to pull this little sight cover off, find the position of the crank and all that, but since you can take this cover off without having to do that first, I'm gonna try and just line up this cam gear on top dead center, and that should be, I mean, it should be timed right. So I'm gonna do that just with the Kickstarter over here. Basically what I want is pressure off of this and pressure off of the lobes at the bottom. So I'm just gonna turn it until the lobes are facing like right here. All right, that should be right at top dead center. That one seems to be perfect. We'll check these real quick. That one's good. That one's a little tight. Okay, so this one's definitely tight. This over here is actually for the decompression mechanism. I'll show you that in a second. You can see you got the intake, and then this goes for the exhaust right here. And then you got a whole separate mechanism over here. That's where you check the clearance for it on the cam. And that's for the decompression on the exhaust valve. You can see the little weight that swings out. So the intake, this intake is perfect. This side is tight. My smallest feeler gauge won't even fit in there, so I think that one's a little tight. So these are all within spec. It's just this one is a little bit tight. So hopefully that's where the loss of compression was coming from. You can see this cam is literally brand new, like it's never even been ran. So hopefully it might be something simple with this thing. My next step is gonna be taking this cam out. In order to do that, I'm gonna have to make sure it's on top dead center with the alignment down there and right here. And then I gotta remove that little tensioner down there. You can see it right there. And then this chain will come loose, and then I can undo these bolts and the cam will come right out. So the way the decomp system works is it's not actually built into the cam, it's built off the cam. So it actually has a little roller that goes off the cam itself. The cam stops right there. There's a little pin here that sticks up, you can see. So this will roll over this pin, causing this valve to open just briefly whenever it rolls over this little pin, as you can see. And then whenever it's actually running, there's a little weight on here, and the centrifugal force opens that weight. And when that weight opens, that pin flattens out so that it's no longer catching on there, and there's no longer pressure on the exhaust valve. And then whenever the engine dies, the centrifugal force is lost, and the pin's sticking back up again. So that just makes the 450s a little bit easier on the starters. These were made for the electric start. Before, the kickstart bikes had an auto decomp system. So you just pull the decompression release manually. But this is an auto system that you don't ever have to worry about. That's why they designed it that way for the electric start bikes. I actually really like this design though, because you know, the alternative is having it in the cam, which would affect the lobe itself. So, you know, if you loosen it too much, it wouldn't run. But if you had it too tight, it would be pushing on the valve over here. So you wouldn't have to have that issue too much without it being too tight. You know, obviously if there's not enough clearance there, there'd be pressure on the valve. But I think it's a really good design. I like it. But I will say I'm biased. I love the 450X. This is an amazing bike, and I can't wait to ride it. So I double checked, triple checked, quadruple checked, and this thing has not enough clearance. I literally used the smallest of every one I had, and it will not fit. So I'm hoping that is the reason why it has a loss of compression. Now, hopefully the valve didn't come loose off the spring, because it's a total possibility the little keeper came out and the valve came up, or the spring came up. So we're gonna hope that didn't happen. It's just a little bit tight, a little bit of wear. And we'll get in there and see what shims in there. And luckily with shims, you can't make them bigger. So if it was too big of a gap, there's nothing I could really do, but I can make one smaller by grinding it down. It's probably not the right way to do it, but I'm gonna do it that way because I wanna get this thing running. So we're gonna get in here and see what we can figure out. See the little mark in there? That's gotta line up with the mark in the case, as it is. And then the lines are even with the head. The lobes are off the valves, so it's on top dead center. You can even see that really, oh God, that really rusted piston down there. Oh my gosh. Wow, I might have to put a bore scope in there and see what that looks like. Yikes. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and pull this guy off here, the little chain tensioner, release this chain's tension, and we're gonna go ahead and take this off and get to that shim real quick. Jeez. Golly. Then you just tighten this up, which will loosen the tension. Now it's locked there. You can see there's no more tension on this chain. So now I can take these retaining bolts off, which will allow me to take the cam out. All right, just one last time so I know I'm not crazy. It's the smallest feeler gauge I have, and it will not fit. Huh. I'm actually kind of confused. So I get it. The little bearings in there, the same on this side. So obviously the cam slides out. In order to do that, you'd have to either take this off or the sprocket off. So I get that. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm gonna get this whole thing out because I have to get this chain off first. There's really not enough slack to just pull it off. So I guess I'm gonna take these bolts off and try to wiggle this thing around and try to get enough slack. We'll see what happens. Alright, so I guess the cam has to come off. They got these little bolts on here. It's just these little Allens. There's one on bottom, one on top. So I'll just have to remove those and that'll pull the whole sprocket off. I just have it to where you pick it up and the shims are just sitting there. Like, what if that little shim would have fell down in the bottom end? Or better yet, what if they both would have fell out and I didn't know which one went to what? It's kind of a dumb design. Luckily, only one fell out, so I knew which one was which. Luckily though, the valves and everything look fine. All the keepers are in. And this thing looks brand new. All right, so my plan here, I know this is a little crazy, but bear with me. So this is the shim, right? I basically need to make it a little bit smaller so that the clearance is a little bit bigger when it's in there. So what I'm gonna do is grind it down just slightly. And then I'm gonna check it with my little fancy dancy gauge here so that I know how far I'm going. So basically, since there was no clearance whatsoever, the spec clearance, that number is how much I need to take off of this so that the gap is that big. So that's basically what I'm trying to do now. Before I make any changes, make sure it's zeroed out. Make sure I stay on the end down here. 1.62. So 1.62 is where it's at. What I need to do is bring it down 0.08. So doing the math on that, I need to bring this number down to 1.54. So 1.54. .56. So it's still just a little bit high. I need to even it out a bit more. So that should be good. We brought it down 0.08 millimeters. So now there should be 0.08 millimeters worth of space. So let's put it all back together and let's see if it worked. So that's the one I didn't touch. It's the one I modified. I'm gonna put it in there with the scratched in up, so that's in the bucket. And the part that's actually in there on the valve is gonna be untouched. So these bolts are actually all different sizes. You can see 2 are shorter than the other. So the longer ones go in the back and the shorter ones go in the front. See how they all have the same amount of gap? That's how you know they're all in the right spot. So I put it on there and checked it and there wasn't enough clearance. So I decided to go down to a 1.50. So I had to end up going a whole nother 0.08 millimeters, but it's still a little bit tight, but the 0.08 millimeter fits in there now. It fits another side as well. It's a little bit tight on the side still, but it's not zero clearance, it's about 0.6. My 0.06 gauge fits in there pretty well, so it should have a lot more compression now. We'll see. So I got to get this sprocket back on. I'll do that real quick. Went ahead and checked over all the other clearances and they're still good. All right, now I can release my little tensioner. All right, chain's tight now. So last little bolt. Looky there. It used to be 30 pounds, now it's about 50-ish. And the only reason it's that low is because it has the decompression mechanism on here. So you really aren't supposed to use these to check compression, but that's definitely enough to run. This engine still seems pretty healthy. Besides looking down that spark plug hole, I will look down there with a bore scope just to see what it looks like, but it definitely has enough compression to run. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this cover back on. So unfortunately, I still don't have the carburetor for it. They haven't got it to me yet, so I can't really try and start it. I'm gonna go ahead and get the plug and stuff in it though, just so I have it all put together. So I'm pretty sure if I just had a carburetor on it, it would fire up right now. So since I don't have that carburetor, I'm just gonna pull this one off my 400EX. This is a 450R carb. It should work on that bike. I'm definitely gonna have to jet it down, but we're gonna try it. So I'm swapping the jets. I had a 192 in there for the 400EX and a 50 Pilot. I'm gonna go back with the stock 160 main jet, and then the stock Pilot jet is a 38, but I'm gonna go with the 42. Looking on forums, that's what a lot of people say they're running, stock. So I'm gonna run that and see how it does. I think the stock set screw setting is like a turn and a quarter or a turn and a half or something like that. I'm just gonna go a turn and a half out. So 1 turn and a half. And I can actually unblock all this hot start stuff now because this bike does have a hot start lever. So it does have the cable and everything. So I can put that in. Well, I was gonna get this on today, but I just realized there's not even a boot on the intake side. So I couldn't even put it on if I wanted to. So I'm just gonna have to get that from them and then I can continue on with this thing. I'm sure I could spray some carburetor cleaner in the intake and get it to fire, but there's no use in doing that. It's really unfortunate for me, but lucky for y'all, y'all don't have to wait. So I got this thing in. It's basically just a little boot that goes in between there and the carb. I went ahead and got the boot put on. We'll go ahead and get this on the bike and we'll see if this thing's gonna start up. carburetor all hooked up, got the throttle cables on it. This pegcock was loose. I don't know if there's anything wrong with it, but I just tightened it back up, put new lines on here, and this is the pegcock that came with it. So I'm gonna put it on and see if it leaks. Well, that answers my question. So it looks like it's coming from here, but it's not. You can see it's coming down the head here. It's actually coming from the pegcock up there itself, like the one that goes into the gas tank. As you can see, I got fuel in the carb, so we'll see if it'll start up. Check the oil and everything. Probably go ahead and put some water in it. So the oil and water and everything's fine. It looks like it was already done before. Headlight's not working. Died because it ran out of gas. So I'm gonna have to get that pegcock fixed before I can ride it, but it's not smoking or anything. It sounds good. The throttle response is good. It's not like choking out or anything. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and order a battery and a new pegcock, like the little insert for the gas tank. This actually turned out to be a pretty good trade. I cannot believe this thing sat up for 10 years being unused just because that one intake valve was a little bit tight. That is crazy. This poor thing, man. Literally set up for half his life just because somebody didn't want to work on it. It's so sad. Because it was literally a free fix. I mean, that one intake valve just grinded down the shim a little bit, and that's all that was wrong with it. The plastics are obviously really horrible, but honestly, I plan on keeping this thing for a while, so I'm not too concerned about cleaning it up. It is super loud and it sounds kind of weird. I do have a 450R carb on it, so it is a little bit different. But this thing doesn't have a baffle in it, so it sounds super goofy. I might see if they still have that so I can put it back in. So this piece here is what's leaking. There's just a little O-ring in there. Okay, so there's actually not an O-ring in there. That would explain why it's leaking. So here's like a little indent for an O-ring to sit. So that's an easy fix. So I got this thing put all the way back together. The gas tank isn't leaking anymore. So now it's time to take this thing for a ride. I still have to get a battery for it, but it is a kickstart, so I can just kickstart it. Something's definitely not right with that carburetor. If you recall, it was basically doing the exact same thing on my 400. So I'm gonna have to figure that out real quick and then we'll cut back. I got this thing all the way back together. After a ton of figuring out the tuning and stuff, which was just carb related, it's just because I swapped that carb on there. That's why I didn't show anything. It's nothing to do with the bike, it's just the carburetor was messed up. But basically what I did is I blocked off the hot start, so this doesn't work anymore. And I upped the jets a little bit. The main is a 190 and the pilot is a 45. It seems to run pretty good now. It doesn't blip out whenever you hit the throttle. So we'll take it for his first ride and see what this thing does. Bro, this thing runs great, honestly. Great. Starts up first kick, doesn't bog anymore. I think I might have this thing perfected. As you can see, this thing is an absolute beast and it is running great now. The only changes that I made from when it wasn't running that good, which was the same thing that was happening on my 400EX, is I richened the needle 1 notch, so it's 2 notches from the bottom, and then I upped the main jet to a 190. The stock is like a 160 or 180 or something like that, and I upped the pilot jet to a 45. Stock is 38, and now it's perfect. Like I said, it is a 450R carb, not an X carb. So they are a little different. I think this one's 1 millimeter bigger. It's like a 41 millimeter instead of a 40 millimeter. But this thing's pretty much done. All I gotta do is get a battery for it, and then the electric start will be able to work. But as you can see, it starts right up with just 1 kick, so you really don't need it. And it's super easy to kick over. But I do want the electric start for the trails. Me and some buddies are actually going to be going up to Lake Greason this weekend. I'll do a lot more riding with this and my 400EX. It's going to be a bunch of crazy trails, big hills and stuff like that we're going to be riding up there. So if you enjoyed this video at all, make sure and leave me a like button. Make sure and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Any and all support would be greatly appreciated. I plan on doing a ton more videos like this in the future, so if you don't want to miss out on that, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for me. Really appreciate it. That's going to be it for this video though. Peace.